Welcome to another episode of the Ambitious Legacy Podcast. I'm your host, Sabine the Purpose Lawyer. Thank you for listening and thank you for helping me be on purpose. Well, we are back. It is a new year. Happy New Year. Welcome to 2023. The new year started off a little bumpy, but thank God all is well. And we're back at it again, sharing with you all the information that I have to help you understand about estate planning, about legacy, about protecting what you have, about preserving it for the next generation. And hopefully this year we'll share even more great, wonderful content information with you. Please feel free to comment, to give me feedback. I want you guys to talk to me this year about what I'm sharing with you and if it's impactful for you, what more you'd like to know, like where should we go with this content, right? I appreciate your followers. I think we have like about 500 followers at this point, which is wonderful. I thank each and every one of you for listening and coming back. So love you, appreciate you. Let's get into it. All right, so today I'm going to talk about Lisa Marie Presley, who passed away recently at a fairly young age. I didn't, for some reason, don't have her age, but fairly young. And she left an inheritance for her loved one. So I want to kind of talk about this story because it helps to highlight some creative things that can be done with trust, or it's good to just see it in action, right? To see what it actually means when someone puts an estate plan together and, things happen as they could at any moment, right? Unfortunately. And then it actually works, right? But one thing that kind of stood out for me between this story and all the stories that we've been talking about. So I always talk about artists and what happened with their estates because they're high profile and it's interesting to kind of talk about. But most of the time it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that we see that they don't have a plan in place, that nobody guided them, that there's all these people making money off of them, but they haven't been guided to protect what they have or preserve what they have, which is kind of changing, but still, unfortunately, we're still seeing a lot of situations where men and women of color who are passing away are not having estate plans in place. And I just find it ironic that this story is about a family that is not of color, right? And they actually had their entire plan in place. So just to think about that, what we have right now is access to information, access to resources where we can be educated about these things. And it's a stark difference from like years ago. Elvis Presley, Lisa Marie's father, passed away in 1977. So that was a long time ago. And things were very different for people of color at that point. So now there's no excuse. We really need to be, doing these type of things, making sure that we are preserving what we have, getting educated on this topic. And you're here listening, so I know you already know that. But for anybody you don't know, please make sure you share the word, make sure you share the message that, this is an area that is not optional. People think it's optional. It's not optional. Everyone has to do something. Everyone has to put something in place for what they've created so that they can preserve it for their loved ones. All right, I'm off my soapbox now. I'm going to talk to you about the details. So I said Elvis died in 1977. His daughter, Lisa Marie Presley, who recently died, she actually did not inherit his estate till 1993. Which tells me, although we don't have any information about whether he left a trust or will or whatever the case is, we do know that there's no information that he did not, right, put a plan in place. And just knowing that his daughter, she was 9 when he passed away in 1977. And so if she inherited his estate in 1993, that means he had some vehicle in place to preserve what he had and make sure that she gets it when she becomes of age. And so in 1993, she was 25 years old. So that tells me that he probably had a trust in place that said that she should not inherit his estate or have access to be able to control his estate until she's 25. And we also know that she was well taken care of, during her childhood and growing up. So, it's likely that the trust was in place to make sure that her needs were met and that she was being cared for, but that she would not fully inherit or have control over this trust until she was 25. So that's what happened, right? And she received his estate in 1993. And then shortly after, not shortly after, but like within a few years, I would say probably like 10 years, because in 2004, she sold a majority of his estate to some music entrepreneur, right, for $100 million. So that is something that I think is freaking amazing. Like, I don't really know what the value was, or, how good of a deal it was. What I do know from research is that a couple of years later, the person who bought it from her then turned around and sold it for 145 million. So it seems like she had a pretty good deal, in terms of, selling. Sorry for my blunder, but she had a pretty good deal in terms of exploiting. That's what I wanted to say. Exploiting the assets that he left for her. And what most people don't know about trust is that when you do have a trust in place, the person who is there to manage the trust, like once you pass away, so it could be a company, or it could be just an individual, a loved one, or it could be your beneficiaries, right? Those people who are there to kind of continue to manage the assets that are in the trust, like property, investments. Like in Elvis's case, he had royalties from his music, he had royalties from movies, he had a massive property called Graceland, which actually is now a museum. And I don't know if there's anybody who doesn't know about Elvis. And he was like a rock star, and he had like a following, sort of like a Michael Jackson. So there's people who are like diehard, crazy, fans of Elvis. So his, compound, I guess, called Graceland, is now a museum, and it makes tons of money, every year. So does all of his paraphernalia from his likeness and things of that nature. So his daughter did a good thing in terms of managing this. And what I was trying to get at is that when you are a trustee, when you're someone who is managing a trust, you are required to make sure that you manage those trust funds in a way that makes it productive, in a way that benefits the beneficiary. So that means if you have stocks, you got to make sure you're investing it in the best and sort of safest. You can't be too risky, right? So you have to invest it in the best and safest vehicle so that it continues to grow and that it benefits those who are meant to benefit from the estate. So like, for instance, in this situation, from what I understand, when Elvis passed away, although he had a huge estate, it obviously is worth more now that he's dead, because we know that's what happens with artists. So it's worth more now that he's dead. But when he passed away and she inherited all of these assets, it was like, from what I understand, difficult. And there was a lot of debt and a lot of, issues that had to be dealt with. So likely her making this sort of deal to get $100 million for, a majority of his estate, not all. She sold about 85% of his estate for $100 million. And so doing that, she got a whole bunch of cash infused into the estate. Not only that, she also kept a portion of it. So now ongoing income is coming into this trust that could then benefit later generations. So it's not just something that she probably did out of just like want, but out of also necessity, to make sure that the assets in the estate were productive, that they didn't get lost or didn't get wasted because of the debt or whatever. So just making a strategic business decision is what happened, and that was necessary, right? I'm sure that she was guided, because, okay, she's 25 years old, within 10 years, she's 35 years old. And from what we know from the news, she may have had some, drug issues and life challenges, right? So I'm sure she had guidance, had lawyers, had accountants and people around her to help her make these sort of decisions. So I don't know if she was the only trustee, if she was only acting by herself, or she was a co-trustee where maybe there was a trust company, or maybe there was somebody who was, savvy, a financial person who was working alongside her to make these decisions. Either way, she had the option of doing that and making sure that she, made the best decision for the trust, which it seemed like she did, right? So she had this trust from her dad, inherited a problem, essentially, but had the flexibility and also the resources to make it productive and make all this money from it. So not only she sold it for $100 million, like I said, but kept 15% of the estate. So now she can then pass that on to her children, which she has 3 children. So from what I understand, her estate is staying in the family. So being that she was taught how to preserve her wealth and preserve her assets, she already had a trust in place now for her loved ones to continue to pass that on, right? And so there's so many lessons there, right? Not only did he provide for his daughter, but he took care of her while she was young, because he died before time, and then left her the opportunity to then step in and have these resources at the appropriate time to then make the right decisions for those resources, and et cetera, et cetera. And then not only that, did she also kept Graceland, which is a museum. So she kept that in the family. The company that she sold the majority of the estate to, they actually leased it for 90 years. So that's good. Look, residual income coming in, residual income from the royalties, residual income from whatever 15% of the estate that she still owned, including his name and all that stuff that's going to continue to make money for a long run. Now her children will benefit from that as well. So what did we learn here today about a trust? So the trust allows you an opportunity to provide for your children later in life, right? Even if you die before time, you can then design what life looks like for them afterwards in terms of their care while they're a child, and then how the assets that you leave for them are, how it affects them as they become young adults. So they're not overwhelmed or bombarded with this huge responsibility, but it could be controlled and gradual, and you could provide resources for them to be able to manage what is left. So that's one, allows for opportunity for you to care for your children. Two, it allows the assets to be used for generations, right? So with trust, you have the opportunity to then allow them to be used for generations, for your children and your children's children, by putting in certain restrictions and requirements. And then lastly, there's a built-in requirement that the trust assets must be productive. So whereas in contrast to a will where you leave your assets in a will to a loved one, they kind of just get it and they can kind of do whatever they want with it. But when you leave assets in trust for loved ones, the trust laws of most states require that these assets be productive. So sometimes people tell me, like, I want to do the Rockefeller Trust, method where we have the assets in trust have to be invested in the stock market. Well, maybe the stock market is the best investment vehicle, but maybe it's not. So you don't necessarily want to be restricted, but trusts already have this inherent requirement that these trust assets must be productive by law. And if your trust is drafted properly, it should have that language in there as well. So those are the things that we sort of learned from this story. I hope it was helpful to you, and I hope you kind of caught on to those gems. And this was a great story to kind of highlight and give us, context of how this sort of stuff plays out. So please leave a comment. Let me know what you thought about this. If you have any questions, drop them below and I'll be sure to answer them. And thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.